Hi there, Michael Eskin here with another ABC Transcription Tools demo. As the tool progresses toward being fully available offline, I've added some new features that will help you manage the database of instrument notes, reverb settings, and the tune search engine collections so that you can preload them into the database and then you will have them available when you are offline. So the first thing is to be able to play tunes when you're offline. And again, this is only for the beta offline version. Eventually, the release tool will do this, but for now it's in beta. You'll want to go into settings, and under advanced settings, there's this option I mentioned in a previous video called allow previously cached instrument sounds and reverb to be used offline. And this is an experimental feature in this version. You're going to want to check that. What that will do is it will allow the tool to use any instrument notes that you've played in the past to be played offline. The problem is that, for example, if you played some tune using the piano, it may be that the notes for the piano that were in the tune you played are in the database, but the rest of the notes of the piano aren't in the database. And I've now made it really easy for you to get the rest of those notes in the database. And these features are under a new button on the advanced settings that's Manage Databases. And if you click that, you're going to get 4 options. The first one brings up a list of all of the instruments that have ever been played and all of the notes that are stored in the database. So on the left side, you'll see here is a list of the various sound fonts and the instruments, the count of the number of notes that are in the database for that instrument, and then the ability to either load all the notes for that instrument or to delete that instrument from the database. So scrolling down the list here, we can see that for the fluid sound font, the acoustic grand piano, and this is the one that's used for the demo tunes like Cooley's and Kesh and Alexander's Hornpipe, that only 17 notes are currently in the database. But let's say I want to be able to use the full range of the piano when I'm offline. All I have to do is just click Load All. It's going to take a minute, the spinner's going to spin, and when it's done, it'll tell you that it's loaded all those samples. And now you can see the count is at 88, so it loaded up all of the notes for that particular instrument. So let's try another one here. So for example, we have a French horn, and there's only 15 notes loaded. But let's say I know I'm going to be doing a lot of work with a French horn, so I'm going to click Load All. It's going to go off and it's going to read all the rest of the notes and it's going to store them in the database. And now we have 97 notes in French horn. Each sound font and each instrument has a different number of notes potentially. So you just kind of have to look at this and say, there's only 10 notes in there. I'm probably going to need more than that. So you should go ahead and click Load All. You see a big number like 80 or 90, chances are all the notes are already in the database and you don't have to worry about it. The other thing you can do here is you can delete entire instruments from the database. So for example, let's say I don't need seashore, so I'll just delete it. It'll confirm that. And it deletes it and it refreshes the list. And we'll say the same thing for orchestral harp here. We'll just delete it. So that's how you can preload all of the notes for any sound font and instrument into the database. The key being that there already needs to be at least one note from that instrument in the database. And I'm going to show you, if there are instruments that aren't in the database, how you can very easily get them initially into the database. The next one is a reverb settings database. This is just so if you know you're going to, for example, want to use the church reverb when you're offline, just click church. It'll load the reverb setting into the database, let's say chamber 2. These are small audio files that are used as part of the reverb algorithm, and they are read and then actually stored in the database. Same thing for the search engine libraries. Normally, when you use the Tune Search, it will just load these libraries up and store them in the database, but you can go ahead and manually force them to be stored just by clicking on these buttons, and it will read it and store it in the database. The last thing you can do from this dialog is reset all tool settings and databases. And this allows you to clear all of the settings of the tool to the defaults, or to actually clear out all of the databases. So that would be the notes database, the Reverb settings database, and the Tune Search Engine Collections database. So if you wanted to completely start out from scratch, like you've never run the tool before, you can click both of these boxes, click OK. It'll give you some confirmation about each of those tasks. And if you click OK, it will go ahead and reset the settings and delete the databases and restart the tool. So what if there's an instrument that isn't in the database and you want to use it offline? So let's take a look at what's in the database currently for all the notes. So let's say I wanted to use a harpsichord sound when I'm offline. So I look through the database and I can say, there's no harpsichords in the database right now. So what you're going to need to do is you're just going to need to be able to create any tune that has the instrument that you're going to want to use offline. So I'm going to actually include this Bach two-part invention in an ABC file. And I know that this file uses the harpsichord sound in the fluid font. So I'm going to go ahead and all I have to do is just click play. By clicking play, it's actually going to go and load all of the samples for that instrument and store them in the database. At this point, if I go into the database settings again, you'll see we should have a harpsichord entry. And we do. So we have our 36 notes that were used in that Bach two-part invention, and they're now in the database. And if I want the full range of notes, I can just click Load All. And now we have all the harpsichord notes. Let's do the same thing for a different instrument. So, for example, I know I'm going to go ahead and clear this. I'm going to add, just say, coolies. And I'll change the grand piano sound here from a 0 to 11, which is a vibraphone. And we'll go ahead and hit click play. Again, it's read all of those notes and it's put them in the database. So now if we go into the database, we should now have vibraphone. Yep, there it is. So that's probably the easiest way to force instruments into the database. And again, I can just click Load All. And we'll get all the vibraphone samples in. And then when we're offline, all of those samples, everything that you see here will be available for you to use when you're completely offline, like in airplane mode. So you've probably noticed there's a theme here. I really want this tool to be very useful both online and offline. And management of the instrument notes is one of the key necessities of being able to use this tool offline. The sound fonts are several gigabytes in size, so I can't just have all of them in the tool all the time. But using these database tools, you can very easily get the most common instruments that you use all the time in the database. And once they're in the database, you can use them online or offline. It's exactly the same. Also, by having them in the database, it speeds up the time it takes for it to be able to play the tunes because it doesn't have to go out to the internet and go read those notes. It pulls them directly from the database. I know this was kind of a technical demo, but I think it's very exciting. And I hope those of you who are using the offline version will take a look at these new features. Again, to find them, they're under Settings, Advanced Settings, and then Manage Databases. And then Instrument Notes database, which will show you all of the notes for all of the sound fonts and instruments that are currently stored in the database and let you manage them.